I'm ahead of the curve, also known as James Bergman, and in today's book review I will be discussing John Gray's Straw Dogs, first published in 2003. I've been wanting to read John Gray for a while now. Multiple people have come up to me and said, look, you have to read this book, Straw Dogs, and John Gray is great. I love the front cover of this edition as well. I think this is such a cool look to the book, and the cover also has some meaning to it. You know, the philosophy of masks and how we're always trying to adopt different personas in order to live in a society that is, that we're trying to function properly. And so, yeah, I finally managed to check the piece out. And John Gray, now that I've had this book on my mind for a while, before reading the book, I looked into his other pieces, and I actually found Black Mass by him as well, which I believe is more political in some sense, and I'm looking forward to reading that. Also want to read his 7 Types of Atheism. I flipped through that at a bookshop and I was really impressed, actually, because John Gray doesn't actually believe that the new atheism movement, that which consists of Hitchens, Harris, Dawkins and Dennett, he isn't too pleased with the climate of new atheism, and nor am I. So on that ground alone, I was on board. After this one, I can say that I'm reassured, let's just put it that way, that his writing and his style and in general, this guy has things to say, and he clearly knows what he's talking about as well. Of course, this can be compared to Thomas Ligotti's The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which came out a few years after this one, in 2010, which I believe is a great companion piece to this one, because essentially they promote the same idea, which is this nihilistic, pessimistic perspective of the world, which I think John Gray perfectly illustrates and demonstrates why it is at least realistic to believe that the world isn't exactly going in very positive places, because in a way we do repeat the past, even though the whole point of the past, philosophically speaking, is to look back on it and try and learn, but evidently we don't do that. And especially in current events at the time, which I won't go into, Putin has been compared to, I don't want to say the key words because I'm probably going to get demonetized for it, but you know what I mean, the mustache guy, the mustache guy. Yeah, they've been compared, and I think it just goes to show that it's so easy for history to repeat itself. It does so in very subtle ways indeed. And yeah, this book is kind of and for those who don't know already, which I'm assuming that you do, but how foolish of me. I never assume, always know, right? But yeah, just to give a brief kind of explanation of what this is supposed to be about. It is a series of sort of essays on philosophical ideas, a bit of politics, existentialism. It has a broad range of themes, but the idea behind all of them is that, look, we're in a bit of trouble, and it's not like we're really going to get away from that trouble. It talks about religion, psychology. So yeah, it is essentially a collection of philosophical essays. I suppose that's a simplistic way to put it. And going back to The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, yes, it is very similar, if not at some points the same. But I don't think that is a bad thing. And this one came first anyway. I think that Ligotti and Gray really add to this cesspit, which is this nihilistic, pessimistic realism, which we need a subtle dose of at times. Not too much though, because it will convince you that the world is beyond saving, and well, believe that if you may. It isn't the most practical observation or conclusion or even lifestyle to inhabit, assuming that is true. And so this comes to something that I was thinking throughout, like, is this book too pessimistic? Like in The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, I would say probably, yeah, it is a bit too pessimistic at times. He's not trying to be constructive in any sense. I mean, philosophically, he's trying to make points and he's trying to convey what he means, and hats off to him in that regard. Like, I think he does a great job of illustrating his ideas. I think it's great. In the same regard that The Conspiracy Against the Human Race is amazing, this one is too. Not that it's a criticism, but I was maybe thinking at some points, okay, sure, but what else have you got to say about the subject that could potentially be constructive? And there wasn't really much of that. And I'm not saying that reality has to be constructive or ideas have to be constructive, but when I read a book, I want to learn from it and I want to move from it. I feel like with this book and The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, it's not as if I can't do that with those books. They're less predicated on the idea that you can walk away and you can try and constructively apply or act out what is in the books, Straw Dogs and The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. And so, in some sense, look, you can walk away from this book and The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, and you can, I guess, embody, you can learn from them. I don't deny that for a second. But the way in which you would is dangerous. And what I was missing from the book, Straw Dogs, is this kind of conclusion, this summary of the ideas shared, and John Gray basically saying, look, all of this isn't great, right? But maybe there's a way forward. Maybe, you can read this and despite all of this, things can move forward in some way. I was kind of expecting some sort of conclusion that, not to be consoling for consoling sake, but I wanted something a bit more towards the end. It just kind of ended. It just ended abruptly. And for me, I was like, I like conclusions. I like that sort of thing, and I feel like the book would have, and it has got a new introduction from the paperback edition, which is really cool. I really enjoyed it. John Gray wrote it very well, and that maybe that serves as some kind of conclusion, some kind of, I don't know. It's not like I wanted some catharsis per se, like I say in my Goodreads written review. It's not like I wanted that necessarily, but I just wanted something. I wanted John Gray to say something that wasn't so unconstructive, so pessimistic. I think reality is, in many ways disappointing, but I also think that from disappointing things you can learn as well. I just wanted John Gray to be more didactic with that. I wanted him to build upon what he said in this, in these 200 pages and make a conclusion that felt succinct and felt like, okay, I can walk away from this book realizing, for example, that, look, whilst all of this is true, there is something to be done, or there is some sort of lifestyle or some, even, thinking critically, let's say, if he prioritized critical thinking at the end, I'd be like, look, fair enough. Like, I wanted something like that, but I didn't get it. And I was left ajar because of that. But it doesn't in any way, it doesn't insult the content whatsoever. Again, the book is great. It's just, I wanted more of a conclusion. I wanted more at the end. It just ended quite abruptly. And it is true that he has other books, like I mentioned before, and I do very much plan to read them. But as a standalone, I feel like this didn't have, and I think Ligotti also had a conclusion in his Conspiracy Against the Human Race. I have a feeling he did, but I just want something like that. I know I've said that quite a lot now, and I'll shut up. But yeah, if anything, that is what I was looking for. I was left ajar, as I say. I do want to discuss 3 favourite quotes, and I have quite a few. Again, my Goodreads written review has more quotes that I enjoyed from the book. If you want to check that out, I'll probably link it at the top or something. But I want to share with you 3 quotes that I felt I would share in this video, and I want to try and go into them. I want to try and analyze them, like what I used to do on my Instagram, but I don't really do that anymore. But yeah, okay, let's get into these quotes. According to the most influential 20th century philosopher of science, Karl Popper, a theory is scientific only insofar as it is falsifiable and should be given up as soon as it has been falsified. By this standard, the theories of Darwin and Einstein should never have been accepted. When they were first advanced, each of them were at odds with some available evidence. Only later did evidence become available that gave them crucial support. Applying Popper's account of scientific method would have killed these theories at birth. What I found interesting and poignant from this passage was the sheer exposure that it dawns upon the scientific method in general. Like, science, and there's many quotes, Hitchens says it a lot, and Feynman, I guess, And these big scientists throughout history, and more so today probably because it's become more of a slogan, but it's like, well, if something's unfalsifiable, then it should be dismissed entirely. But as John Gray illustrates here, it isn't as simple as that. Like, as he said, Darwin at the time didn't have all the evidence to suppose his theory was true. It was merely a hypothesis, whereas today we can back it up with genetics and so on, and more fossil records, and better ways to investigate that evidence. And so many scientific theories in history, if not most of them, were based on the fact that it was a mere hunch, a hypothesis that may have been unfalsifiable. And John Gray elegantly exposes this, because the modern perception is, oh, well, if something's unfalsifiable, then we should just, move it away. We should just walk away from it. But that is quite short-sighted, and it's very elitist, I guess you could say. It's very Dawkinsy, just dismissing anything that doesn't comply to the current scientific method. I think this quote really exposes something, this high standard that scientists seem to have nowadays. And don't get me wrong, like, you guys know, I'm agnostic atheist. I really like looking at evidence as well as I can. I like to, be agnostic about something if I'm not sure. I really try hard to think about what I think and to make sure that it's not false. And yeah, this is just a myth, I guess. This is just a common thing that, and when I read it, I was like, yeah, actually, that is true. That is true. Historically, scientists have negated their own standard of evidence or their own ideas in order to pronounce a new one. And so something has to be transcended each time because it breaks the barriers. Let's say, just for convenience sake, Darwin's theory and Einstein, like Gray says. And so yeah, I thought this was a really thought-provoking one, because it just kind of sheds a bit of skepticism on the confidence of some militant scientists who just dismiss anything if it isn't falsifiable. Like, I think a discussion has to be made of, okay, well, to what extent is something worth accepting as a theory or an idea or a supposition versus that which is not. Humans think they are free, conscious beings, when in truth they are deluded animals. At the same time, they never cease trying to escape from what they imagine themselves to be. Their religions are attempts to be rid of a freedom they have never possessed. In the 20th century, the utopias of right and left served the same function. Today, when politics is unconvincing even as entertainment, science has taken on the role of mankind's deliverer. In fairness, I think this passage is somewhat self-explanatory. Gray is highlighting many things here. He's saying, look, and he's talking about free will, people in general behave and act as if they do have free will, but actually we lack far more will than we think. As Schopenhauer said, I might be misquoting him, please excuse me if I am, but he said something on the lines of, a man can will what he wills, but he can't will what he wills. Yeah, something like that. It's highlighting, or it's supposed to highlight, the fact that we are not in charge of the very motivation of willing something. But yeah, so he talks about free will and how it's essentially this delusion that we try and tell ourselves, because let's briefly think about the consequences of free will not existing. People are not to be held accountable by implication of their crimes, of their actions, if people are not freely choosing what they do. And so this just opens up a whole can of ethical, philosophical worms that are not pleasant to seep through. So yeah, Gray basically provides a brief commentary on that, in more detail, obviously, throughout this particular passage, more so throughout the chapter, but he highlights how religion is, in effect, an attempt, in one aspect, not all, of course, but in one aspect, it abdicates responsibility, and it sort of gives it to a higher being, and that freedom is also restricted to you, because under monotheisms, for example, there are many banishments of regulations, such as in Islam, you're not supposed to consume substances such as alcohol or drugs, or harder drugs, may I say, or should I say. Yeah, religion is an attempt in some way to control the individual, to manage the individual, to direct the individual. And look, I'm not trying to score points against religion or anything like that, but the pretense of there being rules and regulations under a religion, to me, promotes the idea that that God, that the religion, the scripture, wants to in some way maintain and control. Might be a controversial word, but effectively it is to control the individual's thoughts and actions, and make sure that they're in line with the deity that they believe is true, whether Muslim, Jew, or Christian. What he also points out as well, and as I said, John Gray packs a lot into his words. He says, when politics is unconvincing, even as entertainment, science has taken on the role of mankind's deliverer. And so, look, we all know politics is pretty much just a game. I know in the UK, at least, whenever I watch the politicians in Parliament, I'm always reminded of a group of apes that are bickering and backstabbing. It is pathetic to be in the realization or to understand that these kind of people are in charge of the country. It is a bit of a joke to me. And so when it's unconvincing even as entertainment, linking to what I said, science has taken on the role of mankind's deliverer, i.e. instead of religion being man's saviour, now science is. And what Gray also says, which was interesting, was science has in some regard taken over it has adopted or has attempted to adopt the function of religion, but it has failed because religion can offer prescriptions, whereas science cannot. You can't get an ought from an is, as Hume famously said. What he's trying to say at the last point here is science tries to be the saviour, but it can't be. And even more so, who's to say that we should even value truth as well? Because John Gray also discusses this. Like, who's to say that truth should even be our priority? Isn't the journey, isn't the motivation, isn't the very value of truth a religious concept? This is something that was really interesting that he brought up as well. And yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there with this quote and get to the final one. But yeah, there's just so much into this one passage that I thought it would be cool to share. But yeah, remember, guys, leave a like if you are enjoying this video and subscribe if you're new as well. I post many more book reviews and discussions and so on with philosophers, writers, etc. But yeah, I'm going to get to the last quote. Consciousness is a variable, not a constant, and its fluctuations are indispensable to our survival. We fall into sleep in obedience to a primordial circadian rhythm. We nightly inhabit the virtual worlds of dreams. Nearly all our daily doings go on without conscious awareness. Our deepest motivations are shut away from conscious scrutiny. Nearly all of our mental life takes place unknown to us. The most creative acts in the life of the mind come to pass unawares. Very little that is of consequence in our lives requires consciousness. Much that is vitally important comes about only in its absence. He's saying that consciousness is a variable, not a constant, and to me that means the function of consciousness itself is something that, in an abstract way, is entirely unpredictable. He's also talking about our tendency, of course, to sleep and how we need to meet our rhythm, our sleeping rhythm, and we inhabit the virtual world of dreams. Something that he also said in the book too is the idea that actually we're more close and similar to non-human animals than we think. And you might be thinking, oh, well, that's self-evident. It's like, but we don't act like it is. Like, seriously, we don't. We, apart from all of our, intellectual endeavors that we try and disguise of making us higher than non-human animals, when you take away these kind of this egoism, this hubris that we have and that we disguise in intellectualism and our ability to be self-aware, when you take away that hubris, we're actually left with a mere function of being nearly identical to any other non-human animal. We sleep, we defecate, we die. You know, we're here in a temporal sense. We are prisoners of time. And so we, on an abstract level, actually inhabit the world of the non-human animal far more than we think. It's only that if we admit this, then we're also admitting to being more or less arbitrary in light to the cosmos, which is not really a thought that we very much enjoy having, but it is one that if we do have and we do contemplate on, it relieves us of a lot of egotism that would otherwise be inflated. It leaves us with a great sense of humility if we realize that maybe it's about time we started to admit that, because it might do us a lot of good, although arguably not, because perhaps society would turn into chaos. Maybe on an individual level it's good to admit this, but on a group level, as Nietzsche said, madness in the individual is rare, but in groups it is rife. And so maybe as a society, if we embraced our innate animalism, this would not be a great thing. But as Nietzsche also says, it is healthy to not dispose of one over the other, but actually to embrace both, to embrace the beast and man. And I think this is the perfect combination to function under, essentially. Gray also says how very little of our lives require consciousness. And I've said this before, like, you know this, 99% of our processing is unconscious. And this goes back to free will slightly. Yeah, our lives are an enigma, in a sense. But of course, we don't act as if that is true. We act in the opposite manner. We even try to counteract this by taking videos and trying to document things, which certainly helps, but it also creates this illusion that we are above non-human animals and that we're above the genuine sentence that we've been condemned to as humans, which is a temporal mortality. That means that we are, by implication, under atheism, again, arbitrary creatures. And the implications of this are, I digress. On a mass level, not useful to concede, but on an individual level, I do believe, under the right constructive view of it, I guess, this view of our temporalness, of our expedience in the cosmos, I believe that it does serve us some kind of function if we realize this, if our hubris is deflated from this realization. Okay, so looks like my camera decided to cut out. Thankfully, though, it was towards the end, so yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, what Gray, I think I was on my last quote anyway. So yeah, what Gray was highlighting was that humility can be manifested from understanding these hard, brute facts of the world. And this leads me to the conclusion of the video, which is, look, yeah, great book, great companion piece to The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. But yeah, I would have liked more of a conclusion. I think this is a great, short, accessible read. It didn't take me too long at all to actually get through. Yeah, so I recommend it to anyone, but if you are in a bad place and you're reading this, I wouldn't really recommend it. Read it when you have a strong stomach. If you like this video, then please give it a like and help the channel out. The algorithm is pretty horrendous as it is, so I would appreciate all the help that I can get from you guys. Yeah, thank you for checking out my review of John Gray's Straw Dogs. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts, or if you want to start a discussion about the book, or any recommendations like this one. But yeah, thank you guys, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.